me, sir.
I guess that'll work. I've got a generic background right now, so I don't know. I'll probably do something with it properly, but all right, guess we'll start. How's it going?
Off to a great start.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Dean, and this is the InkGuild Podcast. I'm joined with my very good friends, Gabe and Jessica. Do you guys want to say hi?
Hey.
Cool. So, for those of you guys who don't know, three of us are a group of, we're each in our own way writers. We've each been writing for a significant amount of time, and with that, we each have our own interesting stories. So, I kind of wanted to do a podcast just to see, where we've all kind of come from. And, I mean, we're all stuck in quarantine, so what else are we going to do, right? So, I guess we'll start off with just the earliest days of it. So, guys, what were your earliest influences when it came to writing?
Oh man, that's a good question.
Yeah, so in childhood or
Mm-hmm.
what were some of the things that kind of stuck with you when you were first reading a book or reading something super interesting? What were those early influences?
I think one of the first, and I've talked about this a couple times in the past with you, but one of the first that really stuck out to me was I was really into the Sandman series. That have you ever read those?
I haven't.
Yeah, I haven't either.
They're very interesting. So basically, it's a series of 10 graphic novels. That's how I read them anyway. It was a comic book series in the 90s, but that's written by Neil Gaiman, and essentially what it's about is these group of characters who are called the Endless. And the Endless are sort of, in a sense, like the gods of our reality.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 7 of them. And the stories mainly focus around the main character, Dream. I don't know if there's 7 of them. I think there might be more, but it's Dream, Death, Desire, Despair, Destruction, Destiny. And there's one other that I can't remember the name of right now. And the books mainly follow Dream as the main character and his sort of the experiences that he has wandering through an endless universe, controlling people's dreams.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very cosmic and very surreal series, and I think when I was reading it in high school, it was sort of the first experience I'd had with a fantasy story that this Delirium is the other one.
Yeah. Okay.
It was the first experience I'd had with a fantasy story that called to question elements of reality and actually was dealing with these deeper themes. One of the first stories that I read was it was this sort of one-off story where Dream is sort of hanging out with his sister Death.
Mm-hmm.
While she's going around essentially killing people. And I think he says something that really stuck with me. I think he has a line that says my reality and my dreams are so horrifying, and so it's such a dangerous place, and yet the people yearn for dreams, and they seek out to dream.
Yeah.
But you're such a kind person, and you're so kind to humans in your actions. You give people a release, you bring them to the next world, and yet everyone's afraid of you.
Yeah.
And I remember as a high school student, that was something that I think really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And
So
that
that
was
was
yeah,
yeah, that must have been a pretty recent time, actually. As you said, it was in high school. Like, how'd you get your hands on copies of The Sandman?
oh, they just sell them in chapters.
Oh, okay, so what made you want to pick up those ones specifically? Like, was it a friend or?
I was there was this podcast that I was listening to at the time, and the guy recommended it heavily, and he made it sound super interesting. So I decided I wanted to go read that, and I think when I was reading it, I don't know if it inspired me to write, but it did sort of like cultivate an interest in like the cosmic and like um like things that were beyond our understanding, and I think that sort of led me down a rabbit hole that got me into wanting to be a writer.
Yeah, like with such, with such a lot of creative potential, like it's like, oh, this is pretty interesting. I could probably, like, if I could probably put the work into it too and make my own stories, right?
I don't know if it directly inspired, but it I don't know if it directly inspired, but it definitely played a part in what would eventually become like me wanting to make fiction.
Cool. All right, Jessica, what about you? What were your earliest influences?
Oh God. Probably going way further back than high school. In like grade school, like elementary school. I remember reading the first few series of Unfortunate Events books, and those were like I blew through them in like days because I couldn't put them down. It was
Yeah.
like fascinating to me. It was like a realistic world, but not quite. And like the whole narration style of a series of Unfortunate Events is absolutely amazing. So
Yeah.
I don't
So
know. It kind of was more of a shy kid, so I didn't have a lot of friends. um, but it was definitely like I read a lot at the time, but those are the books that like I was really, really into, and I couldn't put them down. But I didn't feel like I was missing anything because I wasn't, outside with everyone else or anything. But I was inside in the library, just like going on these adventures with like 3 other kids. So I think that's like the earliest.
was there anything else aside from a series of unfortunate events? Like, it sounds like that series really does have a lot of attachment to you, but like, was there anything else that you were reading at the time?
I do remember specifically reading City of Ember as well. And one of my teachers read it to me in like grade 3 or 4 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that one just stuck with me because it was a weird concept where they like live underground because of apocalyptic events and things like that. And just kind of like whole organization of their society was so different. So I think it just kind of fascinated me, and it just from there, I think, into a series of unfortunate events and like a whole bunch of other books. The City of Ember is definitely one of like earliest, I think, that kind of made me realize that like you can tell a story and it can be like completely different in the world around you.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't have to be realistic. So I think that's where the fiction and fantasy aspect of my writing comes from.
Yeah. So, I guess me as well. I was pretty heavy into reading books, both inside and outside, and I don't think like really like even though I was reading a lot of books at, like when I was in elementary, when I was in the States, like I think the big stories that or the biggest story that really stuck with me through wasn't even it wasn't even a book. It was if you guys are familiar with the Bionicles from like previous Lego set, like it was a like for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a really really old Lego set, but it's something that a lot of children in the early 2000s grew up with. And like there was so much lore behind these toys that they were essentially being marketed to us. It's essentially like Lego's answer to like Hasbro's formula, where they attach like a whole bunch of story into these toys. And I fell for the Bionicle stories so much. Like, you know, on top of like the characters looking awesome, like there was like this classic battle of good and evil between different islands, different characters, but generally everything still felt the same, so I could keep myself grounded a bit. So I think between the three of us, it seems like world building definitely does play a huge part in what kind of led us into thinking of being a writer. But to ask you guys, like, was there like a specific moment or like a specific story? Like, was there something specific that made you think, oh, I want to be a writer?
I don't know if there was a specific story that made me want to become a writer. Becoming a writer was sort of for me, it was like an end result of just, I guess, wanting to make stories. Originally, when I was a little kid, not a little kid, but when I was before high school, I wanted to get into video games, and I wanted to make video games, and I took some courses in the summer to try to learn programming and like video game design. And after a while, I sort of came to the realization I can't do programming. This is not something I'm like attuned with. And I think there's like, I think a lot of people will say like it is just practice. And I do think that there is an element of practice in any skill, but I think there's also a natural attunement that you have to have. Like it's a combination. Like there are some things that like no amount, like for some people, no amount of practice will help. It just doesn't naturally click for them. Yeah. And I think for me, programming was one of those things. So I sort of not fell out of love, but I decided like maybe I want to tell stories in a different way, and that sort of led me to movies. And I was really into movies in like freshman year of high school. I wanted to become a filmmaker. I wanted to write screenplays and direct. That was a big thing. I was like one of those kids who wouldn't shut the fuck up about Quentin Tarantino in freshman year.
Sounds like someone in first year of college, not high school. How'd you get your hands on Tarantino movies like that early?
Oh, my mom is super into movies, so I basically watched Terminator 2 when I was like a little kid.
Ooh,
and
that's a good one.
That got me started into movies. And I think in high school I started, me and my friends, like we were those kids who would like, we made like little movies with our camcorders, and we would take ourselves a little too seriously. And
also,
that's like great.
So you'd have like drama pieces and whatever, like
we'd have drama pieces. I would go to my friends in the drama, because I was a drama kid. I was a theater kid. I would do a lot of acting as well. And I would be like, hey guys, you should check out our shitty student film on YouTube, and I would like send them links and stuff. And what basically ended up happening from that is I think the more I got into theater, I just sort of and the more that came out about the film industry, I sort of lost it. I felt that's something I fell out of love with was making movies, because I was disillusioned by some of the realizations and like understandings that I came to know about the film industry, and sort of what it was. It's kind of it's a much seedier place than like the glitz and glamour of filmmaking makes it look like. And I think it was in senior year of high school I started writing my first book, which is not good and I will never publish, but I think it was at that point that I decided like that, like I want to tell stories, and I think this is how I want to do it.
Yeah, so you found your niche after kind of like discovering like different ways of trying to tell stories, but like really eventually you kind of stuck with what you're doing right now. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, in a sense, my youth was basically like the beta testing period for a lot of different ways, I guess, to tell a story, until I landed on one that I felt suit me and suit my
that's fair.
My way to want to write. I want to become I think at some point I want to learn animation because that's something I'm interested in as well. But
Ooh.
That would be so cool.
That's definitely like, I wouldn't say it'd be tricky, but Matt, I can hear myself echoing.
It's definitely animation is something that I've always been interested in. Like, I think that, and that's something that I've been told shows in a lot of my writing. I think a lot of my writing is inspired by some of my interests in like anime and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Jessica, what about you? Was there a specific moment, or was it also kind of like a beta test, so you were also kind of like trying different things?
It wasn't really trying different things. Like, for pretty much as long as I can remember, writing stories. From they assigned you short story writing in like grade 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I like tried my hand at writing a story, I was like, this is really fun. Like, I really, really enjoy this. And then a while I wasn't really confident in my ability, so I didn't really share my writing with anyone for a lot of years. It's only been the past few years that I've kind of sharing it with other people.
Yeah, like, would you share it with like family and close friends, or would you just not share it in general?
So I would share it with my best friend. We met in like grade 6 or 7. She was also a writer, and she was really the only other person I knew who liked writing stories. We would just kind of share back and forth, but other than that, it was just for me. So, like I said, like, as going back as far as like grade 2 or 3, when they assigned that first short story, I was like, this is awesome. I get to be in charge. I get to make the decisions. You know, I get to explore things that, like, obviously I won't be able to slay a dragon in real life, but I could do that, you know, with a story instead.
Yeah.
I think it was just kind of always there. Like, I don't remember not being a writer ever. So I think once I learned how to read and write and got reading books, I think it was just kind of natural for me to just write stories afterwards anyway.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't very good at the beginning, as most kids like short stories aren't.
Yeah.
And you could definitely tell, like, I used to give you a page limit, and they'd be like, oh yeah, I only write 2 or 3 pages, and I'd hand in like a 12-page story and be like, sorry, you know, I couldn't meet the page limit, it was too short.
Yeah. Just, there's so much I want to say.
Yeah, and like, I've always been talkative, and I've always had a lot to say and a lot of opinions on things, especially as I got a lot older.
Mm-hmm.
So I think me, it was just natural. Like, I don't remember not being a writer. Like, it's such a big part of me. So when I got to junior high and high school, and people started asking, like, oh, what are you going to do for a career? And I would say, well, you know, I want to tell stories and write books. They'd be like, well, that's not very practical. You should pick something else. And, well, I'm good at anything else. So
yeah, it's just kind of,
I don't know.
Yeah, it's just kind of something that, like for me, like, I've never not been a storyteller in general, and what made me want to be a writer was, I think something kind of like for you. So it started in grade school, and same thing in the States. They would be like, here, write a story, and it could be about whatever you want. And I think I've told you guys this story before, but my first story was a dream I had, where basically, you know, me being a kid, like, and me having a bunch of Bionicles, like, it was just all the ones that I had at the time, they all came to life, and for some reason they all got like Transformer size, like they all got like freaking awesome. Yeah, they all got like freaking huge and started terrorizing the city. So it was like the wrong kind of Toy Story. But
that's great though.
Yeah, but I realized then in that moment that, you know what, this is actually really, really fun. And I'll actually get into this in a minute, but like some of my early stories have been like born just sorry, that was my thing. That was my Amazon Echo kind of activated for no reason, but yeah, I think it was just like in the just the sheer fun in creating things that like you can really do with like a lot of different mediums. Like you're obviously kind of restricted with, you know, making movies sometimes, or, you know, making TV series, like making like visual mediums, there's such restrictions. But when it came to like words, I could pretty much imagine whatever I wanted, and obviously over the years I've gotten better at that. But like it was something that had stuck with me for so long, that fun thing of basically playing God. And like it's helped thing. Like it's definitely like you said, Jessica, like my earliest works have not been great, and but they're necessary. And I guess now comes the part which a lot of writers don't really seem to like talking about, but what was our earliest works?
Wow.
If you
that is definitely a touchy subject.
Yeah, so if you guys want, I'll start. If you know, if you need some time to like not start cringing.
It's definitely a hard subject to talk about. But I think there's a general. I mean, that's with any art. Like I think any artist is like maybe a little hesitant to show their earliest stuff.
Yeah, but you know, so it's just meant to, you know, reflect on, you know, where you started, obviously, right? So
yeah.
So my earliest works were fairly interesting. I think they've almost always been rooted in some kind of fantasy. Oh, excuse me. And that's how it's mainly stuck. So there was the dream that I had, where I imagined my toys coming to life. That was obviously my first short story. When I tried expanding it for the first time, like where I tried like storytelling in a completely different medium, it was actually through a PowerPoint presentation.
God.
And so here's the thing. I was in the Philippines at the time, and that was in around like 2008, 2009, and like I had still had such a huge thing for storytelling that I essentially wanted to do another story, but I didn't have a decent computer at the time, and it was 2009, so no one really had a decent like laptop. And for some reason I didn't really know how to properly use Word, which I know is hard, but like whenever I tried typing up a story, I just didn't know how formatting worked, and you know, and like how to do quotation marks and everything properly at the time, especially on my own, because I wasn't really doing school at the time. So I just completely gave up on like doing it because I was just gonna get frustrated. So
yeah,
there I was with PowerPoint, and luckily where I lived, I had a decent enough Wi-Fi connection. So like I imagined me, my sister, and my cousins as ninjas, because that was a huge thing at the time. Like just
Awesome.
Yeah, like that kind of thing. And like I would get these PNGs of like what weapons each of us would use, and like as bullet points I would be like, oh, okay, here's a roll, here's what weapon we used, here's a rough kind of backstory. And I showed it to my mom, and I'm pretty sure in her most mom way possible, she was like, oh, that's so cool. Like like I'm so thankful for my mom that she decided to say that. And maybe she probably regrets it, because I've been wanting to do story writing since. So if she had said, oh, what the hell is that? I mean, like I would probably be an engineer by now. But yeah, so I think that was one of my more notable ones. There's one other story that I do want to quickly touch on before I, you know, pass it over, but the one where I knew I could be good with it was actually in junior high when I came here to Calgary. It was grade 9, and we were asked to do a short story of pretty much whatever we wanted. I don't remember if we had a set word limit or if we had a set page limit, but I essentially wrote a romance called Simple Wish, and it was just a guy named Devin who wanted to give his best friend Sarah a birthday card. But, because it's a romance, they eventually end up falling in love with each other. And I was really, really proud of that. I remember being so happy with everything that it had been, because by then I had been, I don't want to say properly educated because that makes me sound like a dick, but just I knew better about storytelling and about formatting and applying everything that I knew.
You learn more and become more knowledgeable as an artist.
Yeah, basically. So when I got better at it, I submitted the story with a full smile, and I think I got a pretty good mark, if I remember correctly. I knew it was an A. I just don't remember if it was an A or A minus, but that was encouraging to me, having a high mark like that, because I would eventually turn that story into a bunch of different things. And that was the story that I thought it was going to be romance. That's what I ended up liking, or that's what I would end up writing. But I guess that story is pivotal to me because, it's shown that I get rewarded for my effort aside from just, my friends and family. For a school mark and getting a good mark back, really encouraging. And knowing everything that I had done and knowing just how much I've done before and having that good of a turnout, I think that's when I knew that I wanted to do it more. That's when I knew I wanted to really make it a career. Yeah. So guess that's my little spiel on it. What were your guys' earliest works like?
God, I'm trying to remember some of the stuff that I wrote when I was a kid, but
it doesn't have to be super influential either. Something that if you can just remember it.
Well, I can definitely remember the book that I wrote in high school. That one, because I keep on going back to that and thinking maybe I should give it another crack.
Mm-hmm. We can get to that
essentially.
in a minute.
Sorry, what?
We can get to that in a minute.
I think for my earliest stuff, I was basically just a lot of I was really into spy novels when I was a kid, and I was really into writing spies. I think I wrote a lot of sort of the same way you were talking about self-insert stories. I wrote because I was really into Spy Kids when I was a kid.
I feel that, yeah. There's a special vibe with Spy Kids and Shark Boy and Lava Girl and
vibe.
Oh yeah.
Spy Kids, Shark Boy and Lava Girl, and Sky High have this very specific vibe. This early 2000s sort of self-inserty childhood dream fan fiction vibe.
Yeah, it's something that didn't take itself too seriously, but it was just serious enough to get everyone this is pretty sweet.
It doesn't take itself seriously, but it's everything that you would want from that thing as a kid if you were into that. I remember there was this one scene in Spy Kids where they're in their little submarine, they press a button and they just have a full McDonald's meal.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I remember as a kid thinking that was the absolute coolest thing I had ever seen.
That's all you want out of life is instant McDonald's.
Yeah.
And then there was stuff there was the little bug robot in the second movie. There was I think just the idea of finding out in general that your parents were James Bond and that there was all this spy gear in your basement and then you'd pull down a doorway. And I think that just resonated me with as a kid because I was just hell yeah, I was such a fan of those movies. And I even I didn't really like Shark Boy and Lava Girl in the same way, but that was another one that stuck with me in Sky High. But I think that definitely influenced a lot of my writing, because it was very fan fiction-y, very like the sort of like, oh, here's this character, Jabriel, and you know they're a kid, but they're also a super spy and a master of blah 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 every skill.
Mm-hmm.
So I think yeah, when I was a kid, there was a lot of like that sort of stuff going on with my writing. I grew out of that, I hope, but yeah, I think when I was a kid, it was just a lot of like spy stuff mostly. I remember I wrote this one story that was just a guy who was a spy in a facility, and I didn't even write the actual story. I just wrote a whole story about how cool I thought this character was that I picked up.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. All right, Jessica, what were your earliest works?
I think, again, it's like in grade school, like grade 1 or 2 or something. I wrote a short story, and it was about like this girl and her family, and they lived in like a really like reclusive neighborhood that was like hard to reach, and like I remember is like it was on top of like a big mountain, because I grew up in Alberta, so obviously the mountains were always there. So, but I like don't really remember what else happened, but I remember like going around and like I'm pretty sure I got a good mark on it, but I remember going around and showing it to like my best friend's mom and like our neighbors and my parents and everything, and everyone kind of seemed, you know, super happy about it, and like read it and they were like, "Oh, good job, Jessica! Like this is really good."
Yeah, it's always like those early encouragement from your parents and like from close friends, where it's like, you know, it probably means a lot more, like, you know, career wise, to hear good things from professionals, but like as a kid, when you're just starting out, like having an audience already, even if it was already pretty biased anyway because it was you, like I get that, like it's good.
Yeah,
it's good to have that encouragement.
Words of encouragement from like a family member are potent motivators.
Yeah, it was definitely good to like hear everyone saying like all these really good things, and like teacher making a good mark, and like lots of comments and stuff. And like I just started writing for fun then, just by hand on loose leaf sheets of paper in the middle of class or home or whatever, and then I just kind of kept going from there until junior high. Obviously I had that cringy stage where I tried my hand at writing poetry. It was like really like depressing and angsty because, you know, you're like 14 and everything sucks. So obviously there was no feedback on that because I never showed it to anyone, and I'm pretty sure I've thrown all of that out because it was bad. But then, like, once I got to high school, I think is when I really started like hiding my writing, probably from junior high and high school. Stopped showing it to people because it was more of an outlet for me than it was just for fun. So, I didn't really get any quality feedback, I guess, until second or third year of university. But my early works was based like about people, like families, siblings, friends, just groups of people.
Was it like a
interacting?
Was it like directly self-insert, so you would put in your best friends or your family members, or was it just like you would create families?
So sometimes it was like self-insert. Like I would have my best friend like going on this adventure and like kind of exploring like our friendship, a story. Sometimes I would just like make up a family. I'd just be like, okay, so there's this mom and this dad and this daughter, and then, you know, what their life is like, and this is what they do.
Yeah.
So it was kind of both. I think first it was more like self-insert because you don't really know how to build characters and like other people, I guess, when you're a kid.
Yeah.
So as I got older, it was like less self-inserting and more building a whole character. But sometimes I did, as a kid, just like make up these like wild characters and families and stuff. But my work has always been like people more so than like, I don't know, world building and stuff. Like do world building, obviously, but like the center of it, it's usually about people, which I'm not sure why, but
that's fair. So Gabe actually brought up one of my topics in that you were talking, dude, about like how spy novels or like spy stories in general were like a huge influence on some of your earliest work, and that's interesting to me because like we were talking already about like our earliest influences to start writing, but like when it came to those first projects and when it came to, you know, really dipping our toes into writing for the first time, like what was our like respective influences? Because I'm pretty sure like we'd, you know, as time went on and we started really doing it more for, you know, started writing more, like I'm pretty sure the influences probably have changed, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, that's different for everyone.
Oh,
so
drastically, yeah.
Yeah. So in those early works, specifically, like what were, like how did the influences change and what were those influences?
Like when we were a kid, or like in high school when we started, like
I think when
less...
like around the time when we really started to take writing a little bit more seriously, instead of like, you know, just doing it out of fun, like something that you could really do for the rest of your life.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mentioned the book that I wrote in high school. I think at the time a big influence on that was, I guess, Contagion, the movie.
Mm.
Okay.
Because
see, now you have to talk about your book.
With all that's going on right now.
Yeah, it's relevant to world events.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, the book that I wrote in senior year of high school was called Infected, and
it's my favorite Modern Warfare 2 game mode.
It's about a pandemic that all but collapses all of modern civilization. It wipes out like half the human population. Society is left in complete ruin in like a year. Like it's sort of a half like post-apocalyptic, half pre-apocalypse book. It jumps back between like the politicians and stuff trying to contain the virus, and then jumps to the present with the main character who's trying to cure it.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially the story was about this main character named Alicia, who is the sole survivor of a group of scientists in America trying to cure the virus. And she finds herself infected with the virus. And it's like a race for herself before it kills her, essentially.
Oh my.
Wow.
I would read that.
I would so read that, yeah.
It's I wrote it in high school, so it's not very great in execution, but it is something that I've gone back to, and like maybe I should like take another jab at that, because I maybe especially right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right now would be a good time to kind of reflect on that story, and now that you've got, unfortunately, a little bit of experience.
Just be like,
especially considering it's set in 2020.
Oh my god, really?
This is your fault, Gabe.
How dare you?
You've unleashed this on everyone.
I didn't want to say anything when you first started mentioning a pandemic, but I'm like, my god. Don't. This is not the time to be kidding right now. But like, yeah, no, that's actually really interesting. Like it, and this was senior year of high school. That's interesting too. Like, what made you?
Yeah, that was one of my. I don't know what actually. I don't actually remember. It's so interesting. I don't actually remember the thing that got me to start writing it. I just remember there was one day in the middle of class, I pulled up my laptop, I opened a Google Docs file, and I just kind of started writing it. And then I just didn't stop for a year until I'd written the whole thing. And then I realized it's kind of bad and haven't done anything since.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it was like something that you were learning about in class. Like I know that you learn about like of history and stuff in high school, so maybe it was like something in class you were learning or a book you were reading that just kind of like flicked the switch.
Maybe. I think
Yeah.
it may like my English teacher at the time, Jason Selby, he was a cool guy, and I think that may have had some influence on me to like try to become a writer. He was an influential figure, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I this is something I was lately touching on earlier when Jessica, you were talking about like the positive reinforcement that you got from your family. I think there's this idea ever since the movie Whiplash came out, a lot of people have become very attached to the idea that like that negative reinforcement is the go-to and will create good artists. And I just don't think that's true at all. I think
I agree.
Yeah, I agree
think
too.
if you I feel like if you just take someone's ambitions, you tell them they're no good, and that is shit. That's just gonna just make them not want to pursue it, and then they might never be like the great artist that you're trying to brute force them into becoming. I think, like if someone is putting something out there and they're hesitant to put it out there, and someone reads it and they tell them that it's really good, like that's gonna charge them up. Like they're going to be more effort into it now because they're like, not only do I have encouragement, but I have I want to please this person because they made me feel good about my.
Yeah, that's incredibly true.
Yeah, like it's just a way of honoring that initial faith that someone put in you, right? Like whether it was just because of a relationship or whether because they actually did see something in you. Like it's good to have someone believing in you during your writing, right?
Yeah.
And we're fortunate to have each other doing that. I for one absolutely believe in everything you guys are writing. And
yeah, you guys too. It'll be good.
Yeah, so like we were talking about earlier, like that encouragement from parents or from best friends or sometimes classes, sometimes a mark, like little things that keep pushing you to keep going. Like it's more that really like keeps you from stopping. Like it helps you continue, right? Like you can get negative reinforcement can be as an artist, like obviously like writing.
I think constructive criticism is an important part of like the learning process.
Yeah, like there's constructive, then there's obvious room for criticism, like you want to learn how to get better, but like I don't think like for writing at least that there's any room for like negative reinforcement. I just don't think so. Like when you already have so much to kind of balance and you want to try to find your own unique writing style as much as like a painter wants to find their own unique art style, like it's good to have like negative reinforcement won't do anything, but like little pockets of positive reinforcement from friends or anything, like even if they have no idea how to write or even if they have no idea like what you're writing about, like it's just that little encouragement that keeps you to keep going, or that pushes you to keep going rather. Cool. Well, that was a tangent. I think there was something that is interesting though. Like you talk, like Gabe, like that story or that book was your first big project, and I think that's an interesting thing to touch on. Like, what was our first big project? Like the one that whether we started it as a kid or like in high school, junior high, like even in university, like what was the first big project that kind of like inspired us to like really make this or really start taking writing seriously?
Well, I've already talked a little bit about my book, but I don't know if I'd really consider that my big project, because at the same time as I was working on that, I was also sort of laying the groundwork for a longer project that I've been sort of working on for the last couple of years, which I think, which I that's interested me as a writer, how like some stories you'll have the idea, you'll churn it out, and then it'll just be done with, and then other ideas you mull over for like very long periods of time.
Yeah.
Definitely. The weird ideas that you get that, like, for me personally, I'll come up with the initial idea or like a certain scene or character or a line or something. And then over like a period of like months, I'll be in bed, like about to go to sleep. And then like another flash of an idea will come to me and I have to like scramble to write it down. It'll like go on like that for like months at a time until I have like the whole idea.
Yeah.
Then some will just come and it's like completely done, completely fleshed out idea. And I'm like, what?
So was there a big project for you guys? Like aside from Gabe, aside from you for the book, like laying the groundwork, like Jessica, was there a big project for you? Or was there like that one first big project?
I think big project I started was either in like grade 9 or like grade 10. It was a novel. I was reading a lot of Cassandra Clare at the time, like her Shadowhunter series and stuff, and a lot of Maggie Stiefvater and like other YA fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like on the tail end of like whole werewolf, vampire, like magic era, I guess, of YA fiction that hit in like the mid 2000s, like 2009 to 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started writing this novel about a girl who was like a necromancer, and her best friend was like a sorcerer. And there were werewolves and like fairies and all of that magic. And I was kind of imitating, I think, Cassandra Clare, like kind of her writing style and of like the imagery that she used and stuff. I was to like work through my own style, I guess, by kind of imitating Cassandra Clare and Maggie Stiefvater, and
yeah,
I think I even like tried imitating like some John Green and like a bunch of different authors. I tried kind of incorporating their styles and seeing how it worked, and then kind of making my own. But I've been working on it for like 6 years, and I still haven't finished a single draft because it just keeps going. Like the idea just keeps going. So I think that's the biggest project I've worked on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So for me, my big project, or my first big project, is actually I'll tell you guys it's convoluted, but I don't think it actually is. It's actually, my first big project is actually my current project, which is, like, you guys know it as Xeno, which is hopefully going to be the first book in a potential series of books. And like I've told you guys before, at least, it started off way different as this. So I wrote it in 2015, like somewhere close to the end of high school. And initially it was a sci-fi story set in the near future of like 2080, 2075, 2080, of a cyborg assassin named Porter Xeno, who finds out through shenanigans that, you know, she's eventually going to be the one that takes down the government, or takes down this corrupt government, as a lot of sci-fi stories do. And I think what kind of initially killed it for me at first was just how it was progressing. Like I'd done my research, you have plotted story arcs, and I have my characters, but I think as the writing went along and as I started writing it, it just didn't work out anymore. Like, a lot of moments felt a little bit too cliche. There were, like, cliche in the sense that, like, I couldn't make it my own. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't take I couldn't take a familiar sci-fi trope and put my own twist on it. And I think that was the first indication of it. Second was just that I think midway through, the plot points just started changing and I couldn't really keep up with it anymore. Like, obviously in a writing process, like the plot's bound to change at some point, but just it was changing faster than I could keep up with. And I think the real nail in the coffin, like the reason why I stopped altogether, was just that I just lost, like, simply I just lost the drive to complete it.
Yeah.
But I knew then that I had the patience to write a book, so I decided to scrap most of everything that book was, except for the title of the book and the main character's name. And I think, simply put, I just like those names. So I gave it a few months, close to a year, I think, before I started rebranding into everything that it is currently. And, you know, we'll get to our current projects in a minute, but just, I think without that initial setup, without everything that I had already put into it, I don't think I would have learned the most important thing about writing a book to me, and that's being patient with yourself. Like, you could churn out as much creativity, or to me at least, like, you could churn out as much creativity and as much, like, you know, fascinating characters, world building, whatever, but just, if you don't have the patience for that, which at some point I ran out of in the first draft, like, I don't think you're gonna get a book complete. Like, I think it was our friend Georgia that I shared this with, but postcard stories and shorter stories in generally, like, that's where a lot more talent shows. Like, how good can you tell a story within, like, 500 to maybe 1500 words. But with novels, in my experience at least, and I don't know if you guys agree with me or not, but, like, yeah, it takes a lot of talent, but the biggest thing is patience. Like, you really need to trust the process.
I think a quote I forget goes, only 3 rules to writing, but unfortunately there are.
You lagged out, Jessica. I didn't hear a word of that.
There's, but it's like there are only 3 rules, but unfortunately nobody knows. So I think that everything that it takes a lot of.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Like, there's so much creativity when it comes to what we do, and respectively what we want, or what we each want to do for the rest of our life, probably. So
it's definitely a process that requires a lot of, like, temperance and introspection. That was something that I learned in a course that I took a couple years ago in poetry. That was something that I struggled with as an artist, was less creativity and more introspection, like trying to understand myself and figure out, like, sort of my own, like, I feel like a lot of people struggle with that, sort of figuring out themselves and understanding themselves. There's all this, there's a lot of issues with, like, people who have mental illnesses, who don't go to therapy and stuff. They might not even know that they have a mental illness. They might just think there's just something wrong with them. And
yeah, or it's like it's a bad day, or it's maybe just a bad situation. But
I remember when I was a kid, before I was diagnosed with OCD, I just thought that I had just an issue.
Yeah.
I just thought, and it wasn't until I was diagnosed later that I realized, like, oh, this is this is just this is a diagnosable thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you have to have as a writer is looking inwards at yourself, sort of understanding your own limitations, understanding who you are as a writer and what you and not even just as a writer, that goes for any artist, I'd say, like, requires like introspection and understanding yourself in order to make something for others.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I think before I get into like really looking into ourselves, like really looking into just like how much, like just how much we've changed over the years in terms of our writing. Like, I think let's talk about right now, and by right now I mean our current projects. So, I already mentioned that my current project is Xeno, which is still going to be my first book, but it's just completely different than what it was at first. And instead of a sci-fi story, it is now technically a fantasy, but I call it a modern fantasy because it's completely different world, different setting, a lot more hopefully a lot more unique compared to like the bustling streets of New York and whatever. But it's my own city, it's my own country, it's my own continent basically. And like that took a while, like in those months that I didn't start the first draft of this current story. Like, I just spent world building. Like, I had spent like designing the world, like picking out like the names of the continents and whatever, like pinpointing where everything was, and on top of that I was also working on characters. So I'd kept the original name Porter Zeno as my protagonist, but then I decided to start listing all the other characters that would be accompanying her on this first journey. So there's her best friend, Magna, who Jessica loves, and I love that she loves her. Like,
favorite character, hands down.
Yes, thank you. That means so much. And like, there's Magna's family, and there's a whole bunch of interesting like characters. I feel that it wasn't an easy thing to start off with. Like, when I wrote that first draft of Xeno, which is and I know it's confusing, but like this current iteration of Xeno, when I had the first draft of that finished, I had it vetted by an editor, or I had it vetted by a freelance editor named Eli, and he was really, really helpful with, I guess, just kind of understanding everything that I know now when it comes to storytelling. But like, it was in that moment where like getting the feedback and knowing like everything that I had put in up until this point, that like I wasn't gonna stop. Like, I knew that was going to be my, I knew that this is going to be the project that I will hopefully see on a bookshelf someday. But I think that's looking a little bit too forward in time. But that's my current project. What about you guys?
Me, I think I've just been writing short stories lately, kind of testing out new ideas and like new styles and new ways of writing, that kind of thing. Because I've kind of finished my creative writing classes, just kind of taking everything I learned from them and just kind of trying it out with the ideas that I've had like lying around. But I'm also working on my what was supposed to be short story, Darkness in Paris, and
which I love.
Now
I'm happy it exists.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been working on that. It was only supposed to be like 5 or 6 pages, but I think
and everyone wanted more.
I think it's up to 15 or 16, and like I'm not quite done telling the story yet. I've been working on that and like tweaking it, arranging things, and trying out different plot ideas that I've had for different endings. But it should be almost done, hopefully, and then I can bring my awkward length story and be like, here, one take it.
Just
it's gonna be like, it's gonna be such a weird length.
Just please, sir, may you publish me?
Publish me. Need this.
Please, sir, can I have some publishing?
Please, I have some royalties. but
Please, ma'am,
yeah.
can I have some royalties?
Please, sir, may I have a movie deal?
Please. Yeah, so I've been working on that, and I mean it's been a struggle because I wanted it to be a short story, but then when I started writing it, I realized that a lot more to say than I could fit in like 7 to 10 pages or however long short stories usually are.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like a big adjustment from trying to kind of plot out 5 to 10 pages roughly, and then just kind of saying screw it and tossing that idea and just writing the story until it was done.
Yeah.
Which is like a total new concept to me. I've always been the person who's like, okay, I need this many words and this many pages, and it has to be this long or this short, and it has to be this many words, and I have to do this. So it's been interesting just kind of working on the story until I feel it's finished.
Yeah.
It's been interesting.
Cool. So, moving on to Gabe, I know that you are working on a new story called Skybusters. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm working on a couple of things, but I'll start with that one since that's the one I've shared. So,
It's the one you shared, the one I've been wanting to read.
Skybusters is essentially the story of a group of teenagers living in a fictional town in Oregon called Greenback. They're sort of in a midway point in their lives. They're about to graduate high school and move on to college. They're sort of at that point in life when you're like not a kid anymore and you're starting to become an adult. They have to learn responsibilities and stuff.
Yeah.
And in this transitional, difficult time in their life, everything goes sideways when a bounty hunter from space very literally crash lands into their lives and causes a whole eruption of science fiction-y madness to erupt in this small quiet town.
Nice.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
like when
That'd be the
you
blurb.
Yeah, I think when you first
I think I gave a very drunken description the other day.
It was a very it was drunken enough to hook me.
just the other day I gave you a very drunk. I gave the drunk abridged version of that description.
The drunk abridged version, yeah. That's
I basically just in a very slurred voice went, okay, so there's these fucking teenagers. There's an alien. Bada boom, bada bing. Michael Scott, Stephen King.
hell yeah.
Oh,
That's perfect. I love that.
iconic. I love it.
Yeah. All right. So what's your thing? What's your other story?
The other two that I'm working on right now. One is you guys probably have over the year come to know me as a horror writer. So one of the things
Over
I've been
the
working on
years.
is I'm trying to over the last like semester.
Yeah, we didn't totally just meet we didn't totally all just meet a few months ago, me completely by accident, but like, we'll get to that later.
So I'm trying to compile a lot of my horror shorts into just one book and then get that published maybe.
Ooh,
That's
a
the plan
collection.
right now.
Like a collection of horror
Yeah, like a
short
little
stories.
yeah, like a little. It's called I'm calling it Midnight Viewing right now, but I might change.
Not Junchi
Okay.
Ito.
Sounds good.
Thank you. I got a lot of compliments about Shiver, so that would be a focal point.
Mm. What was that one
And-
story that I read? I think it was called Crab Face.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my
That's a really
God,
good
yes.
story. I'd love to
Yes.
see that in there.
For those listening at home, Crab Face is something I may have published online in a short amount of time. So look it up. It's basically the
You can
story
plug later.
about-
You can plug later. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
I am plugging something that does not have links yet.
Yeah, fine. Go ahead.
Can plug later. Basically, it's about it's just the story of this rich guy. He goes to this island, and this crazy old man tries to turn him into a crab. And that's the
Honestly.
That's the
good.
sober, non-abridged version.
yeah.
That's the sober subbed version. All right. So, it's interesting that. So first of all, guys, thanks for sharing your projects, and I feel like that's a pretty good segue into what I want to really get into, and that's just basically how we all met. Because at some point, you know, projects aside, like, we had all come into Micheline's class, whether that was in first year or second year or whatever, or whenever, basically with, you know, it doesn't really matter how much experience we walked in, but we all walked in with the idea to really get better at it, right? Like, in the back of our heads, maybe we were joining the class to, you know, to have fun, share your stories, but like really in the back of our heads, at least, it was more to, you know, and you guys can agree with me or disagree with me, but it was more to get better at what we do. So I remember for my 1118 class, that was the first day, or the first class I actually met Jessica, and we've just stuck with each other ever since. But yeah, I remember that first class where I walked in having, like, the most experience that I've had writing was, I think, like, because I'm taking journalism as of recording this, like, I already had the experience of a publishing process, not the writing, like, not for creative writing, obviously, but like how publishing works in the journalism sense. But on top of that, I also knew just story writing from a different perspective. And I joined the class thinking, you know, this is like this creative writing is what I want to do with the rest of my life. Like, journalism is a good alternative for me. Like, it feels like something that if creative writing doesn't work out for a while, then I at least have a good alternative. But like, I will ride or die as a creative writer. And so I joined the class with Zeno firmly in my back pocket, ready to start showing it off and get proper feedback on it. But that's why I joined. Jessica, why did you join? And then, Gabe, we can get to why you joined your 1118 class.
So our 1118 class, I have sat down with myself because I had done 2 years of university in a different province. So in Nova Scotia, at a different university, I had done 2 years already. And I'd never taken any writing classes. And I was sitting there looking through Mount Royal's like academic calendar, and I saw that they had creative writing classes. So I kind of looked at the abominable stack of books and notebooks and papers that I have in my room, and I was like, you know what? Maybe it's time that I
just actually
try.
use these.
Yeah, like maybe it's time that I actually you know, get some feedback, get some help, because I don't really know what I'm doing. You know, I'm just putting words on paper and hoping they make sense, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
for me, it was this like big leap from going from like I really want to write and be an author, and you know, I really, really enjoy it, to I'm taking it seriously. When I remember walking into that 1118 class the first day, and I was terrified. And then Michelin, our professor, she was like, yeah, you'll be workshopping in this class, like you'll be bringing in your own writing, reading it, and getting feedback right there. I remember thinking to myself, like, oh God, no, I can't do this. I gotta drop this class. I can't do any of that. Like, sharing my writing is one thing, but getting feedback, like, right then and there, reading it out loud, is something that I can't do. And then I, again, sat myself down and I was like, hey, this is part of being a writer. Sharing your writing and reading it is part of being a writer. And so I kind of said, okay, I'll do one workshop, and if I absolutely hate it and can't do it, drop the class. And so I went in, and Michelin was amazing. She gave me like a ton of good feedback, and everyone had like good things and constructive criticism for me, and I actually had a lot of fun. And of course I met Dean, so I had to stay after that.
Oh, thank you.
And so like I got used to the idea of sharing my writing, and I mean now sometimes it still does make me nervous, but it's kind of, it doesn't really, that nervousness just kind of went away after a while. I started taking creative writing classes because I realized, like, hey, I'm in my third year of university, and what I wanted to study was English, including creative writing, and I haven't taken a single writing class yet, so I should. Like, I want to. Then, of course, I was terrified when I got there. But yeah, I took it to see what I could learn and see what I could gather from it, because a lot of writers say, oh, you don't need to take writing classes, you don't need to go to university for writing. For me, it was kind of like, well, I think that every writer should take a creative writing class of like some kind.
Yeah.
To get like a bit of instruction, like a bit of guidance and feedback and like information and like techniques and different ideas. I think it's just better to get in like a class setting, whether it's like online or in person at a university or like at a town hall center or something. That's really helped me, taking creative writing classes, is like the reasons my writing got a lot better like pretty quickly. So
yeah. Gabe, were you the same?
Yeah, I was kind of the same. I think when I first started, I saw there were creative writing classes and I saw there were workshops. I think back in like when I started university, I was like, oh shit, that is something I should like really take. I forgot to mention this during the last question, but the third project that I have been working on since I started university is a fantasy series called the Night Reaver Saga, and I think back in early university, I really struggled with sort of getting started as an artist, and I think one of the big motivators in taking the class was like I want to surround myself with other creatives and get like opinions on my piece, sort of learn better, like how to become better as a writer.
Yeah, like it takes one to know one, right?
So damn badly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I'm not gonna get better by if the only input that I have on my process is my own inner monologue.
Yeah,
because my inner monologue is always going to either have the bias of this is good or this is dog shit the other way. I want pizza.
Just be like, bro, we can hold. The other thing too. We can put this on hold. Let's go eat.
I think that's the other thing too. I haven't thought of that. That's a good point. I think when I surround myself with people who are writers and people who are creatives, it motivates me to want to write more. I think like during the years when I wasn't really in any creative writing classes, writing took me so much longer because I was just the only creative input I had was my own dumb brain.
I just want to
so true.
I just want to state for the record that I was like, when I was like for like a few minutes ago, I seriously was not trying to be rude. I was just thinking that Gabe was gonna be like, oh yeah, so I wanted to like surround myself with a bunch of other writers, because then I would probably be more hungry. I like, that's how my dumb brain works. That's my inner monologue. It's just dumb, but anyway,
just
yeah.
Food related.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a nice dinner or before this, actually, but not important.
That is kind of like an impulse, though, because I think during early year university, I didn't write a lot because I was just too busy going to like parties and getting drunk and getting high and just hanging out with people who.
You were being normal, okay?
Yeah. That.
Yeah, but
like,
no, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I still do that, but I think being in writing courses has definitely shifted my trajectory more towards like not only is this something that I want to do, but this is something that is tangibly possible. This is not like a pipe dream. This is a pretty realistic ambition, like given our what we all do and what we all work on.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's like, to go off of what you said, yeah, it's definitely a really good thing to surround yourself with other writers. And for those who are listening who don't know about it, this actually leads into a perfect story of how I started talking to everyone here. So so Jessica and I were in the same 1118 class, and then we also moved into the intermediate fiction 2265, still with Micheline, and that's where we met. That's where her and I met Alicia, Brett, Lexi, some really good friends, Matt too. Shout out to him. Like, that's where we took our skills, really developed it a little bit more. And funny enough, it was actually through Brett that the following semester I found out that, you know, Jessica, Lexi, Matt, like, they were in another creative writing class. And I was like, and just to tempt me even more, it was also another writing class with Micheline. And I'm like, oh man, damn it. Like, and it sucked because I had my astronomy class in between then, and I really, really wanted to visit that class. Like, I really, really did. So at one point, and I hope my astronomy prof is not listening to this, but at one point I was just like, you know, I'm gonna stop by. I want to see, at first I want to see my friends again, but it felt like I had been missing that kind of atmosphere, you know what I mean? Like, it felt like something was missing, surrounding myself with like-minded people like myself, you know, writers. Like, I love the atmosphere of sharing ideas and sharing your stories. Like, it was almost euphoric to me.
Yeah.
And maybe I was just being annoying and I couldn't stay away, but like so that's how like one day I stopped by, and some of the I didn't even really, like, before then, that's when I started talking to some of our other friends, like, you know, Maeve, Brooke, Mari, Brad. Like, I'd stalked, oh no. like I started talking to, like, them and you, Jessica, like, before the class, or before I even did that one, like, drop in. And like, I remember, like, it's technically a whole new group of people, and I always like hearing new stories. So eventually I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna try, if I can, I want to try stepping into this class a little bit more often. And here we all are. Just
months later, here we all are.
Yeah, I mean, like, what's happened since that first class? Like, I've obviously worked my way into, you know, talking with a lot of you guys a little bit more. Didn't really want to risk jumping into your guys' classes and skipping my own class, because that wasn't fair. But coincidentally, unfortunately, coincidentally, quarantine happened. And my astronomy prof, he wasn't doing online classes, but I found out somehow that you guys were. So I'm like, can I stop in? So then that led to the creation of our Discord, and it was just another breeze. And we can touch on that too, but like, wow, what a tangent I just went on. But I think, oh wait, yeah, no, I know what I was trying to touch on. So I think following our own respective plot arcs and how we've changed so much as writers, like I feel like, first of all, like how much, like to yourself, like how much have you really changed as a writer?
Oh man,
It's a really weighty question.
yeah.
Like there's the obvious differences where it's like, you know, you learn, like through our classes specifically, like you're taught, you know, how to use like technical things such as grammar, spelling better. Like you're taught how to do that better and whatnot. But like really, like considering every, like all of that plus like all the stories that you've kind of encountered through your life, like what's really different, like what's changed from, I think Jessica put it pretty perfectly, like at one point I wanted to do this, or I wanted to be a writer and I wanted to do this for fun, but then it was suddenly, I want to start taking this seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think from our classes, obviously, if Michelin is listening, then obviously, you know, I learned how to like.
thanks,
away
Michelin,
from
for everything that you're
passive
doing. Yeah, thank
Honestly,
you.
right?
God
Like,
bless.
thank you.
We
Like,
love you.
Like from her, I learned like how to get away from the passive voice and like how to speed up my story and how to pace it, and tension and dialogue was something I really struggled with. But like I also learned smaller things like how punctuation can like affect your story and the way people read it. I also learned how to use a semicolon, which was great. And like, so aside from like technical things, I think as a writer now, just taking the classes, having Micheline, you know, someone who's actually a published writer and who's published books and like who has been in that publishing writing kind of world for a long time. I think I just kind of gained more like confidence in myself and my own abilities. Like she could do it, then so could I, that kind of thing. Because I mean, as a writer, it's almost like wishing to be a celebrity. It seems like it's like a pipe dream, like Gabe said. Like it's almost unrealistic for a long time. I think the biggest difference now, obviously, would be my confidence. Like now, I'm fairly quick to share my writing with people and get feedback and share ideas and things, and I'm quite confident in my ability to, you know, like come up with characters and story to go along with them, and I'm pretty confident in my abilities, definitely compared to when I started taking creative writing classes. But I think another thing is that I kind of got used to the idea that being like a published author is something that's actually like attainable, is incredibly motivating. And you know, like seeing other people and hearing, like Micheline would always talk about, oh yeah, I had students who were published in this class, gone on to publish books and things like that. Like hearing those kind of stories about people who were sitting in the same seat as you like 4 years ago or something was incredibly motivating. So I think it was a lot of the realization that being a published author is like an attainable goal. It's no longer this like celebrity type thing. I think that was an important lesson.
Yeah. Gabe, how about you?
Yeah, I was basically going to say the same thing. It's I think one of the biggest changes I've noticed is like confidence an ambition as a writer, the more I feel like the more time has gone by, the more I've been able to feel confident about my own abilities as a writer. I think that's something else that I noticed about like a lot of my early writings, even going back to high school. Like, um, I don't. A lot of my writing was very unoriginal. I think that
Mm-hmm.
like back when I got started, like I was pulling inspiration from a lot of different sources to try to get my stories written. Just because I think it was for no other reason than because I didn't that I could write something that people would enjoy. That was just how I wanted it to be, or just how I had made it. So I there was the impulse to sort of make something that was that had like had a familiar taste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
A lot of writers do that at first.
yeah, and I think that was I think in my very first versions of Glass Inferno, which is the other story I'm working on right now. Uh, the very first version of that, it was like I basically just whenever people ask me about it, I just described it as like, oh, it's like help. It's it's a demon character who's like part of a military agency to fight other like demonic creatures and stuff. And I was very passive in my description of it. I wasn't very confident in how I described it, and the story itself was very familiar. It drew a lot of inspiration from stuff like Hellboy and Attack on Titan,
Oh
and
yeah.
I just, and I think as I've grown as a writer, and I think this is the reason I wanted to bring up that specific project because that's something that I've been working on long enough that I can sort of see like a visual representation of how the story has become more from a place from a personal place where like I wanted it to be like this because I like it the way because I wanted it to be in a way that I like it and not I want this to be sort of like something that I like. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
I got
does.
it.
Like
I think you like a lot of writers at the beginning, you especially if you share your writing, you write to like ease audience that you have in mind, or you write really similar to books that you've read or like a book that you're reading at like the moment you're writing the story because I think it's just easier and like more comfortable that way.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like it's nice to start off with, it's nice to start off like kind of, from a familiar book or maybe something else you've like read or written before. Like it's not a bad thing to draw inspiration from these things and maybe start practicing with their technique. But
Yeah.
like eventually you do come into your own, right?
Yeah, like and that's sort of that's sort of like what happened with with me as I got further as a writer. I was like, okay, maybe I'm not gonna make this a Hellboy story. I'm gonna have and I did some like work on character on developing my characters and sort of working on that to make it more in line with sort of what I wanted it to be. I made it not an urban fantasy anymore because I felt like that was just too. I feel like urban fantasy. I like urban fantasy. I don't have a problem with urban fantasy, but I do feel like urban fantasy is it's sort of like a gateway drug. Not a gateway drug. That's a misuse of that term, but
Just be like,
it's
a chain of gold right in my veins right now.
well, it's like an entry point. I feel like it's a if you're getting started as a writer or writing urban fantasy is a good place to start because
Yeah.
it's something that you can write that you don't have to do a whole lot of world building to because people will like generally get the gist. And I think the more I like gained confidence as a writer, I decided, okay, this book is not. I'm not going to make this urban fantasy. I want this to be its own world. I want to have my own countries and settings. It's not going to be. Originally, that was the other thing. Originally, it was like a secret world sort of deal, where there was like the real world, and then there was like this like, oh, we have to keep the secret world a secret from the real world. And the more time that I had as a writer, and the more time that I spent the more I realized, like, I don't want to fucking do that. That's so limiting. I want to have like these stories that I think would be cool to have in this story because I like them, and I can't do that within this limiting context of trying to make it like the real world and like the sort of the familiar. And
yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah, I think for me, how like how much I've changed is obvious. Like obviously, confidence is one thing. Like being able to present your work is one thing. Like it's nice to getting all that feedback from you guys and from like from other people. But I think for me, like the biggest thing that I've really taken away so far in being a writer, especially one that wants to do it for the rest of my life, is I think patience. And I've touched on that before, but like really like I think and it's a key example because when I had when I had the first draft of the current iteration of Xeno vetted, I was told in final remarks that I had a lot of work to do. And I didn't take it personally, but I remembered that like I think that's what got me. Like that really stuck with me since that. Yeah, if I want this to be my debut project and this to be the catapult to my career, like, and I still want it to be, like, I have to be patient. I have to be careful with how I pace things. Like I don't like I've learned through that I shouldn't try to force anything. Like if I have an idea that comes to me, then it comes to me and I can jot it down easily. But if it's not, like I used to think that I had to reach a certain word limit or a certain page limit or a certain chapter limit even. And that certainly does do the job for a lot of writers, but for me it just doesn't. Like I'm not at my best when I feel like I have to get this done, right? And because it's my first book and I haven't really published anything creatively, like I have all the time in the world to do it. But I think that's the thing, patience. Like I know where these characters are going to end up. I know what they're going to be doing, and I know how the world evolves around them. I just need to remember that it's not an immediate thing. Like there will be times where passive voice, I can't work around that. There will be times where, you know, I have to use coulds, woulds, shoulds, ises, ands just to set something up. But that doesn't mean that it's permanent. Like I can eventually go back after that's been written and change it. Like, I can't be so, what's the word, defeatist about anything anymore. Like I feel like what I'm trying to say is I can't consider everything that I write final.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're drafts. They're not like my next book. Like this book isn't supposed to be done by the end of the year, even though ironically I've set my goal to do that. But like my thing with this book is that if I want it to be the best that it can be, and if it's going to be something that people will be buying, then I want it to be the perfect result out of patience, not out of talent, because I know my talents and I know my skills when it comes to writing, and that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that I'm guaranteed a success. For all of us, it doesn't really mean that. Like you might have one or two stories published, sure, but the beauty about being an artist in general is that you always have the chance to improve. And even though when this book is eventually going to get published, my writing style will obviously be different with future books. And I think even that kind of overthinking, like when I get into that kind of overthinking too, like I have to remember to be patient. Just work on what you've got right now and trust that everything will eventually fall into place. It'll all work out. Don't have anything to worry about. You're talented. you're super good at what you're doing. Just leave it be. Let time speak for itself.
Mm-hmm. And I think, and you touched on something briefly there that struck a chord with me just now, which is like publishing and success. I think that's another thing that's definitely changed with time, is the need to be successful. I think that was another thing that like sort of influenced me to want to write from like the perspective of like, oh, like what I think might be enjoyable for other people to read, is because I think when I first got my start, I was writing with the drive being like success. I want to be a successful author. So, and my writing reflected that. It was very try-hardy, I guess. And the more time that's gone by, and the less that I've like really cared whether or not my writing ends up being super successful or not, and more if I am pleased with it, if I like it, and if I am enjoying writing it, I think that's another thing that has grown the more time and the more time that I've put into this craft.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
yeah, I definitely agree with that. I've learned from many years as a writer now that being a writer kind of means that you have to be selfish with your writing. You know, you have to write things that interest you and things that you want to write. Like, you can take into account what your audience is saying or feedback you get, but ultimately, like, the choice is yours. It's your story, and like, if you're not interested in it, then why would you expect anyone else to be?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, with art, like, there's always going to be subjective interpretations with it, right? But I feel like the best kind of art is the one that's produced out of passion and out of love. Like, it's the same thing with fashion, right? Like, you look good no matter, like, if you can wear whatever you want, but if you feel comfortable in it, you look amazing. And that's the same with art too, like, or with art and writing in general. Like, I don't want to fall into the system where my work sounds the same, like, sounds something like The Maze Runner or The Hunger Games or, City of Bones. Like, you can certainly make comparisons to it, or I can certainly make comparisons to it, but I don't ever want to mass produce something exactly like that. I want the story to be written in my style, under my time. And if it's not like that, then, I might be a writer, but I certainly wouldn't be the writer that I want to be. If that makes any sense.
No, yeah, that makes sense, I think.
Yeah. So, I think that's it. Let's, actually, wait. I know, like, these last few minutes have been very, like, wisdom-esque. We've been sharing a lot of wisdom. Yeah, wisdom-esque, but, like...
Love it.
That wisdom.
Yeah, like, if there's actually something that you want to pass on to each other, pass on to our other friends over on our Discord, and pass on to, like, anyone who could be listening to this, like friends, family, just whatever you want to say, do so now.
I don't know. I feel like I said all I have to say about the covered topics. I feel like I've said my piece.
Like, if you were like, you could take a more, like, wisdom route. So, like, if you were to speak to someone about being a writer, so, like, if you were speaking to a young writer, like, what would you say to them?
Write for yourself. Honest to God, that is my biggest. That would be my biggest, like, piece of advice that I think I would give. Like, write. Don't write for the sake of success. Don't write for the sake of trying to please others, because you can have those things and those things are good, but if you, ultimately with writing and with any art, I'd say, like, like, just write for yourself. If you want to make a weird decision because that fits your taste, go for it. If you want to have if you want to make your world in the way that you want it, like, even if it's esoteric as balls, go for it. Like, make it. I think the best art comes out of people who just who makes things that are purely reflections. I mean, I think I've talked about this with you, Dean, in the past. My favorite, and I talked about this earlier, how, like, anime has influenced one of my favorites is one called Fooly Cooly, and
Nice.
everything about Fooly Cooly is dripping with personal decisions.
Dripping.
There's like, sorry, what?
I'm just dripping.
It's oozing personal style. Like, there's every character in the creator has talked about this. Like, every character in the show is left-handed because he thinks that left-handedness is mysterious. The characters use guitars as weapons because he thinks guitars are cool. The main character drives a Vespa, a yellow Vespa that he thought looked like a cool design. There's this one scene where one of the character's guitar weapons is like, I don't remember what they're called, but they're one of those guitars that's like shaped like an upside down V.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And
oh yeah. It's a badass guitar.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's a badass guitar. And he said in an interview that he spoke with one of his friends who was a musician, and he asked him, like, what's the most badass design for a guitar? He said this one. And so he's like, this is the one that I want to use for the guitar of my protagonist when he gets his guitar in episode 3. There's a scene in the show where there's a giant alien hand, and that hand is his hand. He 3D scanned his own hand to put it into the show as the big monster.
Awesome.
That's amazing.
There's a robot in it, and the robot has a TV for a face. It's all, and like, which came purely out of the fact that Gundam and Mecha was very popular at the time. He didn't want his show to be associated with that, so he tried to make his robot as different looking as possible. Every single decision came from the fact that he wanted it to be his favorite story, and I think that's something I think that's a big takeaway, and I think that should apply to every writer. Like, don't, as much as success and pleasing others and making a good story are good byproducts and things that you should want, I think the best advice that I think I can give to a young writer, from my perspective at least, and from my experience, is just try to write your favorite story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jessica, how about you? Any words of advice? Any words of wisdom?
I think, like, write a lot. Like, don't write one story and then say, I'm very proud of this story. I'm going to, wait until an idea or inspiration comes to me. Like, writing every day has really, really helped me with, like, world building, and, like, even I get more ideas when I write more often. So, like, I would just say, like, write a lot, and, like, yeah, some of it, like a large percent of it, will absolutely suck. That's fine. Like, first drafts are literally you telling yourself the story and, like, figuring out where it goes, figuring out who your characters are, and how they act and how they think and how they move in the world that you've put them in. So the first draft is meant to be, like, worst thing you've ever written, which obviously it's not, but it's meant to feel that way because you're kind of making your own way through the story. Like, writing a lot definitely helps, because, again, it's practice. Then, you get more ideas, you get, like, more fuel for your creativity through writing more often. And then, of course, you get to finish drafts, you get to finish your stories, and then you get to go back. You get to take what you've learned from that first draft, put it into the second draft, or the 8th draft, or, like, the 20th draft. Whatever number of drafts you've written, you're always going to learn something in the previous draft. So I think writing a lot definitely help you find your own style, find your own like rhythm and your own process of writing. Like maybe you like to write outside, maybe you like to write at home, you like to handwrite, maybe you like to use a typewriter, maybe you like to use your computer or whatever. Writing a lot will definitely help you kind of work through a lot of things. It'll help you just get the words down and get your ideas out, and then work on organizing them and fixing them so that by the time you get to the last draft of a story, people will say, oh yeah, like you must have known what you were doing the whole time, and you did such a good job on this, and this story seems so well put together. And you'll say, yeah, of course I knew what I was doing the whole time, but
it's like, haha, I'm good at what I do.
Yeah.
I knew what I was doing the entire time. I knew this.
Yeah. So like I think writing a lot has definitely helped, and like writing often, like even if you sit down for 20 minutes and you don't write a single word, at least you sat down for 20 minutes and thought about something to do with your story. Like it can be that simple. I know one of my favorite authors, V.E. Schwab, she like tweeted about something about how most of her books were written in 20-minute intervals because she would set a timer, write for 20 minutes, and then take a break, and then write for 20 minutes. And I was like, that is a genius way to write, because it doesn't matter what you write in those 20 minutes, because 20 minutes are up. You get to move on to the next thing. So I think writing a lot is what I would tell like anyone who's struggling with writing or like unsure of themselves. Just like write a lot, because it's like the best practice you're ever gonna get.
Yeah, I second that. Yeah, I agree. I guess for me, in terms of words of wisdom, I think the most important thing that I can tell a new writer, or you guys, or our friends listening to our Discord, definitely is to be patient. Like, be very patient with yourself. Like, it can be for a postcard story, or it could be for a novella, it could be for a 100,000 word novel. Like, a lot of us are already pretty talented, and a lot of us have some pretty amazing skills when it comes to storytelling and pacing and whatever, but it can be hard to really kind of find that when all you're doing is thinking like, I want this to be the next Harry Potter, or the next Throne of Glass, or the next whatever. Like, don't think like that. Like, like Gabe said, like, trust that your work will be its own special thing. And definitely, yeah, with what Jessica said, like, do write a lot. It definitely does help with developing your skills in general. But I think overall is to just be patient. Like, understand who you are and understand what you're writing, because no matter what, it's going to be something special that you've created, right? Whether or not your family sees it, or whether or not the entire world sees it, like, that's entirely up to whatever happens once it gets out there. But just understand that as a writer, you've got a lot of potential, and you just need to be careful to not rush it, because the best things that I feel always take their time. So, yeah. That was episode 1 of the InkGuild podcast. Do you guys have anything to plug? Yeah, so if you guys want to keep up with us through social media, to keep up with our lives personally, or maybe we will occasionally post some updates. Like, Jessica, I know you have your writing Instagram. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So my Instagram is a very fictional review. And basically I just post books I'm reading, um, like what I'm doing, where, when I'm writing, what I'm writing, that kind of thing. Um, and I also have a link there to the blog I write of the same name, a very fictional review, where I post like book reviews and always like things about being creative and writing and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Cool. As for me, you can find me at Daniel Cordero. So it's my full name, last name, no capitals on Instagram preferably, because that's where I really kind of show off my writing a lot more. Like I do occasional like modern poetry, if you want to call it that. Like if you're familiar with like R.H. Sin and Rupi Kaur's work, then that's the kind of work that I kind of lean towards with my poetry. As well as I post drawings of my original characters, as well as some original characters from my friends. Like I've got one for Gabe in the works. That'll be something to look forward to. And then another friend of ours, Maeve, she has some amazing potential for a sci-fi story, which I won't say anything about yet because I don't know how much she wants to reveal. But the three of us, we've gotten a good sense of it, and it's amazing. And I want to draw out her characters, so you can find artwork like that on my Instagram. And then whatever social media else is out there. I'm pretty much on everything, but I won't tell everyone everything. Gabe, what about you?
I don't really have anything to plug. I don't use social media that way. You've seen my Instagram. I basically just post pictures I find funny.
All right, everyone, check the ether. Just watch the skies. Maybe you'll see a manuscript floating in the woods.
Gabe will send it by carrier pigeon.
Yes. Maybe like a carrier pigeon with his latest piece will arrive faster than my acceptance letter into Hogwarts.
Honestly, at this point.
I mean, I haven't sent one, but like if I did.
If I did, though.
If I did. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks you guys for joining me. This has been episode 1 of the InkGuild Podcast. Stick around for more. Maybe. I don't know.